All right, music fade, and we get live to the classroom, right? Okay, yes. All right, a bit of class logistics. So the midterms will be corrected and back to you physically next Wednesday, a week from today. Let's see, and then final prep will be in 2 weeks' time. It's like, wait, this is week 8 already? Okay. Time flies when you're having fun. Been a lot of interesting events since post-election. As you who are in the room heard Randy say, a number of people are trying to get petitions. I think you need to like 25,000 from your state to petition to the White House to secede from the Union. Left open, of course, is the question of the reason that there is a union together is that there are things that the federal government can do that individual states cannot. And one of the things that individual states cannot necessarily do, for example, if Texas were to secede, okay, do you have your own diplomatic relationship with Saudi Arabia, or who's going to use your oil? Are you energy self-sufficient? Are you food self-sufficient? The fact that you have bananas year-round in a place where bananas don't grow, as an example, it takes an acre of land to grow food for one person. So does each state have farmland to feed its people unsustainably for a year, in a year-round growing season? No. So give up on that. You lost with one country. Let's move on. But people are not. Yesterday I went to a lecture that I'll try and include maybe later today if we get to it. I'm not sure that we will, but I left you with some material last week around axiology, so I wanted to show you practical applications of that, because there's no point in giving you a construct unless you see how it works in the real world. Part of the piece, if you see at the bottom of the slide, it talks about the new Jim Crow. A lawyer named Michelle Alexander, who now teaches at Ohio State University, their law school, basically wrote a book which she talked about yesterday in the lecture, and she's essentially saying the conditions of slavery and post-slavery Jim Crow are now being replicated in the criminal justice system with drug offenses. And even though the people who are being targeted are primarily black, it also affects other folks, because there are some states where merely possession of a joint or less than an ounce gets you life in prison. Straight up. Texas is one of them. Brother did 40 years for possession of 2 joints. Okay? Now, you know it sounds crazy, but there are more people incarcerated since 1980 for drug offenses alone than were incarcerated in 1980. Total. The United States is the largest incarcerator of its citizens on the planet, and most of those are drug offenses. And there's a whole financial incentive behind doing that. Okay? You can have your property taken by the feds for suspicion, not actual conviction, for suspicion of drug trafficking. And that could be simply passing on a phone message. Say your friend or your cousin or whatever is a drug dealer. Okay? Federally, I'm serious. Federally, you could become part of a conspiracy and do jail time for passing on a phone message to a drug dealer. your relative, without touching any product at all. And there's a financial incentive for that. So what happens then is you lose your right to vote. You can't get a job because you're a felon. Can't get food stamps. Can't get public housing. Boom, 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 boom. Right? So, and it replicates the conditions of slavery. And she was actually not, she's actually from Ashland, or went to Ashland High School and went on to law school at Stanford, et cetera, et cetera. She didn't believe it. She said, most of the stuff I wrote in my book, when I heard that stuff, I just didn't believe it. But then my eyes were open. So let's look at practical applications of axiology. So this is a tale of four workers. Now, Nichols is an industrial psychologist, which means he studies how people work together. And, you are studying essentially to get a better job, right? So you are going to work quite probably in a diverse workforce. That is going to be the norm. So Hans, Euro-American axiology. Javier, Afro-Hispanic axiology. Hideo, Asian axiology. And Herman, Native American axiology. So, tale of four workers. Hans, Javier, Hideo, Herman. So they work in this scenario, they work for the same multinational corporation which makes timekeeping devices. So originally started out making Swiss watches, but now makes time clocks, digital time clocks, for industry, and was originally Swiss in origin. Each of them is having the same bad day. So Hans, the Euro-American axiology. So Hans missed the bus. So Hans works at the corporate office in Geneva. One day he forgets to set his alarm and so misses the bus. He arrives 2 hours late. Because, as you know in this axiology, time is money, he is docked 2 hours' pay. He is given a stern lecture about promptness with insinuations about the laxness of his upbringing and insinuations about his heritage and all that kind of stuff, and then he returns to work from missing the bus. Right? Because time is money. Have to be on time. Okay, it's nothing personal, just business. So the basic axiology value, where the highest value is control or acquisition of the object, dominates here, because time is an object. Time is money. Too bad if you miss the bus. Okay, nothing personal, that's just company policy. Nothing personal, it's business. You don't work, you don't eat. Show up on time, ready to work, or else. Cut and jive, right? Too bad if you're sorry. Your feelings are irrelevant, as is our relationship. Like, you could be friends having beers with your supervisor, but sorry, I still got to dock you 2 months' pay, right? And that's the condition that you experience working at Mickey D's in America, right? Because that's the basic axiology that you're familiar with. Start and end on time, X amount of hours, X amount of seat time, etc., equals X amount of credits. All that. Javier, the bus left me. Now, if you study language, one of the things that if language is representative of thought, that thought is also representative of the history of that culture and the ideas that generated that culture. Now, literally in Spanish, the same phrase that we got in English, I missed the bus, in Spanish literally translates as the bus left me. Same idea, right? But a different axiology is in operation. They're not trying to shift blame. The bus left me. So Javier works in the Mexico City corporate office. Same company, right? Different cultural framework. Generally speaking, within a multinational, the parent culture dominates, but local conditions, particularly local axiologies, might influence how things get done. So Javier works at the Mexico City corporate office. One day he forgets to set his alarm and so misses the bus. He arrives 2 hours late. Because time is money, he is docked 2 hours' pay. But his supervisor is his friend. He says in Spanish, "You cannot dock my pay. I need the money." The alarm clock did not set itself. That's the literal translation in Spanish. Not, "I forgot to set the alarm clock." The alarm clock did not set itself. The bus left me. He nervously gestures and knocks his coffee cup to the floor, breaking it. Oh, look, the cup broke itself. Okay, now this is not an attempt to shift blame. It's not. Even though that's a literal translation of the words, which I'm not going to give you here, but if you study Spanish, you can see that translation. His friend says, "This is the 5th time this month. I cannot keep covering for you or I'll lose my job." Well, actually, his supervisor, being friend, acknowledging the relationship, "I've covered for you already. You know how our boss is looking for promotion, so I'm going to have to dock you the 2 months' pay." So there is some leeway here because of the relationship. Now, in this axiology, the highest value is the relationship, and the relationship must be preserved. So he's not trying to avoid responsibility. He's preserving the relationship. You cannot blame me. The bus left me. The alarm clock didn't set itself. The cup broke itself, silly cup. Okay, so this is coded within the language which Javier himself did not create. So Spain, again, was conquered by the Moors, who were black Africans. Not only did they influence the language, so like al equals el, both mean the, so Alhambra, El Segundo, that's LA-centric, but, towns. They also influenced the dominant axiology, so the value of relationships, the concept of personal honor, friendship, was reinforced towards an African norm rather than a European one in basically 700 years of conquest. Hideo, Asian axiology. We waited for you. Hideo works at the Tokyo corporate office. One day he forgets to set his alarm and so misses the bus. He arrives 2 hours late. It's raining. Now, in anywhere else, especially Oregon, it's raining, so what? Right? Blacks were the reason we were made, it was the part of the generator of making it illegal for us to come here is they figured, oh, well, we're not going to have slaves, and black people are naturally lazy, and they'd be even more lazy because of the rain, right? So it's raining in Tokyo. His work group is outside the factory waiting for him. His supervisor does not say you are late. He says simply, we waited for you. In the rain. Now, that wouldn't happen in another cultural context, right? Everybody'd be working. And he doesn't have to say he'd be late. He's late. It's obvious, you late. But there's a different axiology working here. Like for a Zaibatsu or a multinational, for example, like Mitsubishi, Sony, or whatever, the day you join the company, you join in a group. And the highest axiology in this particular instance is the axiology of cohesion of the group. So you show up to work and you have You work together, you take breaks together, you even take vacations together. Seen them, groups of Japanese tourists from different companies, they take vacation together like in Hawaii or whatever. You see them, not just Hawaii, all over the planet. And the company takes care of you, and the loyalty is basically almost like the mafia or the Yakuza. Because of different axiology. He waited for you. So do you think today will be late again? No. He'd kill himself first to avoid dishonor. So highest value is cohesion of the group. And the consensus, so for example, is harmony. Consensus actually equals, there's a word in Chinese that I had actually in an earlier version of this program that actually it was bad Macintosh Chinese. I'll have to have my daughter actually, who reads and writes Chinese for her foreign language for medical school, write out this consensus. But the idea is with one voice we speak. If I know your mind's, your heart's thought, I know your mind's intention, and then we speak with one voice, and that word is consensus, all in pictograms. Okay? Group sings the company song, takes breaks, exercises, and vacations together. Decisions are made by consensus, meaning that a strongly held minority viewpoint can be honored without blame because it may be correct. So it's not majority rules. We sit and we find consensus until we all agree, and then once we all agree, we move on together. We pick that direction, but we take the time to make the consensus work. And the minority viewpoint might be correct, so we'll listen to it rather than overrule it. Now, this takes time, obviously. And it also takes building relationship to actually make the consensus work. But once we come to that consensus, we move together. No dissent. Because we've worked out the dissent. Herman, Native American axiology. Lucky you were late. Herman works at the Rapid City, South Dakota manufacturing plant as a mechanic. One day he forgets to set his alarm, sleeps late, has a bad dream about dying, and misses the bus. He arrives 2 hours late. On his way to the factory, he sees an owl, and it's daylight. And there was an owl in his dream too. Owls signify death or transition. Not necessarily death, but some kind of transition. His work group is outside the factory milling about. He says, "Hey, what happened? What's happening?" His supervisor says, "Herman, where were you?" "Harold got hurt really bad." Harold works next to Herman's station. If Herman had been on time and working at his station when the steam pipe above him broke, he would have been dead. He remembers the owl in his dream and on his way to work and mentions that to his supervisor, who says, "Lucky you were late." So Native American axiology, which Nichols uses the Greek word pan and theos. Pan and theos means all in the Great Spirit. Also quadriunital logic. So all things are your relatives and all things are connected. So whether it's the Aztec Mexica-Tawe, the Lakota Mataquiasin, or the Kirawina Chai, they're a South American tribe. Chai means companion, the other half of me. So when we talk about jokingly CP time or Indian time, colored people's time, CP time, we're actually not clock time, it's the appropriate time. It's not like the party don't start till I get there, it's the time is the time that you get there. And it's the right time. Has nothing to do with the clock. So, Herman may actually be acculturated or assimilated into the Western concept of time, lateness, etc. That's why he set the alarm clock. But you're having difficulty? Come on, transition. His sense of relationship and attunement to the natural world may be heightened archetypally within the culture. So, for example, the idea that Alkebulan, Turtle Island, Asia, Oceania, Europa. So, Alkebulan being Africa, Turtle Island the Americas, Asia, China, and the rest of the Asian continent and subcontinent, Oceania, Polynesia, Europe, Spain, Portugal, England, France, Germany. So the problem with any reductionist model, like with Nichols, is you reduce a complete history or situation to simpler terms. It's that some critical complexities get left out. So when cultures interact, they can either be symbiotic, and that's a biological term, where two different life forms get together and collaborate to do things that neither one could do. So for example, a lichen on a rock is a combination of algae and mold. Right? So mold needs organic matter to live on, but cannot photosynthesize. Algae needs moisture to live on. So they get together and they get on this rock, which they're basically collaborating symbiotically. So the algae produces photosynthesis and energy from sunlight, where mold doesn't usually grow. And the mold provides a anchoring substance, and they work together on the cellular level. So symbiosis. So cultures can either be symbiotic, or one can suppress another through assimilation and conquest, which is the usual model that we see in Western civilization. So when I talked about last time acculturation, taking on cultural elements, and assimilation, erasing cultural elements in favor of a dominant cultural norm, both things could be happening, but usually in cultures that encounter Western civilization post 15th century through colonization, assimilation is usually the norm. So you will find people, especially under the influence of corporate influences, shifting their culture and suppressing their culture in the workplace in favor of a dominant normal, usually the Euro-axiological norm. But then, for example, in meetings and other interactions, you'll see people kind of acting out their pre-programmed inherent cultural scripts. So Maya Lim provides an interesting example of this. How many of you heard of her? No? Oh, well. So this is an early picture of her in her undergrad days. She got soul, but she's Asian. So she's a Chinese-American architectural student, or was a Chinese-American architectural student at Yale. Her parents are both American-Chinese college professors. So I mention this to let you know, they didn't just get off the boat. They're American. So the wall, that is the Vietnam War Memorial Wall, was a project for her funerary architecture class. So you have heard of the wall, right? Yes? Anybody been there? Okay, check this out. Well, you can Google it, but I'm giving you the story, the backstory that you don't get. To basically, Nichols uses this to illustrate axiology. All right, so Vietnam, we won't get to that time period in this class. We get there late winter term and early to mid spring term. So I'll just let you know, the Vietnam War killed 55,000 plus American soldiers and 1 million Vietnamese. Easily. All right. So if you were going to put 55,000 names on a wall that's 200 feet long, how would you do it? That's the gig, right? Funerary architecture. That was her class project. How would you do it? How would you order the names? 55,000 people. 4 or 5 different services. How would you order the names? Come on now, you're socialized in English to make lists in a particular order. How would you do it? Remember, she's American too. She went through the same training that you did. How would you order the names? Sing it out. Come on.
Alphabetical.
Alphabetical, right. So A to Z, right? How else?
Under categories of the service branches.
Okay, like rank.
Sure.
What other categories are you aware of within the service?
Yeah, like different branches.
Okay, so service branch. Could be rank within that too. What else? What else is on a headstone? Date, so time, right? What else? Oh, all right. So date, time, and what time value would you use? See, remember, axiology encompasses your view of time, too. Right? And you're I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, you're acculturated into a Euro-American axiology, which views time as beginning, has a past, present, and a future. But this is the past, so you start at one end and you move to the other, right? Okay? In a line. Okay? Beginning to end. Beginning of the war, end of the war, right? In a single line. So, and reading which direction if you're facing the wall, right? Which direction? Left or right. Okay. Anything else? No? Okay. Got it about covered? All right. So the form of the wall